an honour to have this opening session. It's the most important topic in the world to me, AI and the direction that it's taking. So I think it's very suitable that we're kicking off with it. Gay mentioned unintended consequences. That's certainly something that we need to think about when it comes to artificial general intelligence and superintelligence. So I'm very thrilled to be joined by Roman and Daisy. You've all got their bios, so I won't go through them, but Roman, among other things, leading AI safety researcher, frequenter of many of my favourite podcasts personally. Daisy McGregor with Anthropic has an economics background, which I think is foundationally useful for almost everything these days, but particularly for AI and AI policy. And it's worth knowing that Daisy was instrumental to bringing together the Bletchley Park AI Summit, which of course put on the public map a lot of the issues that we're going to be talking about today. So I'm just going to, by way of introduction, give you a couple of sort of definitions so that you've got the context for where we're going to be going. Artificial general intelligence we typically define as intelligence that is at least as capable as any human being at any useful task. A widely accepted flow-on effect of generalized intelligence is that it will become super intelligent pretty quickly. There's no reason why human-level intelligence is a barrier. It will quickly surpass it. That's a pretty reasonable conclusion to draw. It will be orders of magnitude more powerful than human intelligence, including humans collectively. It's a stated major goal of the AI labs to build AGI, which, among other things, would be capable of self-improvement. So we're talking about machines building better machines. Jared Kaplan, the co-founder of Anthropic, this week told The Guardian that giving AIs this autonomy to make more powerful successors to themselves was the biggest decision we would have to make about AI, and also the, quote, ultimate risk. He said this was something we would likely have to reckon with by around 2030. So we're talking about a 5-year time frame here. Sam Altman has predicted in recent months that AGI could be reached by 2030, and that's consistent with what a lot of AI researchers have been saying for the past year or two. Demis Hassabis of Google DeepMind, which kind of rounds out the big three of the major frontier AI labs, his latest prediction is a relatively modest 5 to 10 years for AGI to emerge. But either way, we're talking about really close timeframes. So I just want to get a quick overview from each of the panelists. Daisy, perhaps starting with you on the topic of AGI and superintelligence. Do you want to give me a 2-minute burst on where you think we are at on the AG pathway? Is it going to be the best thing that ever happened to humanity, the worst thing, or somewhere in between?
Great. Thanks for having me. Nice to see everyone. What do I think about where we are on the path to AGI? So I would say that right now, there are things that the models are better than expert humans at, and that's in areas where they've been really intensively trained. So coding is one of them. It is like objectively better than extremely good humans in many areas of coding, not all, but many. And you know, it's exceptionally good at AI tools now will by a big margin basically be better than expert scientists and PhD level in areas like physics and chemistry tests and things like that. But it is still quite bad at some things. I can go into more detail of this, but we've been running an experiment in our office where we've basically said, try and run a shop. You know, you Claude, the Anthropic's model, you have to order in what you think would sell. Your customer base is Anthropic employees. You have to set your pricing strategy. You have to be profit maximizing. You can't go below zero. And it's been like really bad at that. It's hallucinated quite a lot. I think it's like too much for it to take in. It could be trained at all these things, but I think it's an example of where it kind of hasn't generalized yet, basically. So you could make it better at that specific thing without a doubt. But having said all of that, I would say we are quite confident. I am quite confident that we will get to AGI basically through scaling without probably any major breakthroughs. If we're defining AGI here as AI being better than any human in a given field. I would say that because coding, I think, has somewhat proved the point that the models can learn really complex things. And before coding, we actually weren't like 100% sure if that would be true. Like we weren't sure how it would, if it could learn something that complex. And it learned it more efficiently than we were expecting. So you didn't need to show it that much data for it to like really get it. And coding is like a perfect problem set up. There's code base all over the internet. Lots of it's really high quality. You can see all the use cases. So for training an AI model, it's like there. But what that tells us is to make it better at other fields, being an accountant, other areas of science, I think it is a matter of basically showing it the data. And a lot of the research now in labs is actually about, how do you create a data set, which basically is the best accountant in the world doing their job, and capture things like that, kind of those elements of human judgment. But I think we're pretty confident that can be done. To your point from Jared, the things that are question marks here are probably, in terms of speed, are probably to what extent can AI itself do some of that research and development process? So how much does that get automated and sped up? But also, to your really important point, how much does the training that you're doing, particularly in the post-training phase, which is, you kind of pre-train the model and then you give it data to make it better at specific things, how much does that phase generalize? And I think that's a big question mark, and we don't know how much that's going to generalize right now.
Right, and just quickly, will it make us happier, sadder, dead, or somewhere in between?
I'm sure we will spend most of the rest of the panel talking about this.
Okay.
So I will just give a high-level answer, which I am way more optimistic than I was about 2 years ago. I would say I am tentatively optimistic that it will be net positive.
No. I'll settle for that. Roman, I think you might have a slightly less optimistic view, but go for it. Same question to you.
So it will make some people happier. I can name those people, but...
Did I name them in my introduction, those three?
You have. I agree with your general definition of generality. I agree with your state-of-the-art assessment. I think one nuanced difference is AGI would be able to learn new skills. It doesn't have to come from the company, from the lab, pre-trained in that specific domain. It's a drop-in employee. You need to hire a secretary, you get the model, you show it what to do for a few days. Like a human employee, it would be able to do it. And it would be true for all domains where a human employee would make sense, including science and engineering, which allows us to automate this process.
Okay. And just explain your position quickly on PDoom. I just have to. I think it's important that everyone understands, for the context of the rest of the conversation. You have a famously high PDoom. Just explain PDoom and what it is for you.
So PDoom is probability that things will go really bad if we create advanced AI. And people define it in many different ways. Everyone's dead, everyone wishes they were dead, bad culture, bad economy, whatever makes you happy. But why? It's close to one for me. Why so? So we have multiple companies all in agreement that in a few years, 2030, 2027, doesn't matter, we're going to get to human level and beyond. But none of them ever make a claim that they know how to control this technology. Unless there is a latest update coming through, no one has any idea how to do it. The answer is usually, we'll figure it out when we get there, AI will help us make safe AI, something like that. And my research shows, no, you can't indefinitely control something way smarter than you. It's just not possible. So if I'm right, and it's kind of like building perpetual motion device, perpetual safety device, guaranteeing that every model ever made by every company in every environment with all the malevolent interactions, any data, will never make a big mistake, that's very unlikely. So if it's impossible to do, then I give very high probability to bad outcomes.
Let's dive a bit more into the state of the tech. So there have been some highly publicized advances in the past couple of years. Well, I mean, obviously, since ChatGPT came out, that really put AI on the map for a lot of people. But since then, we've had reasoning models that break problems down complex problems down into steps that it can manage one by one, and it strings these together into a more sort of strategic plan to reach a higher level or longer term solution. We've got longer context windows, which, to use it, I mean, it's a technical term, but it basically refers to the length of an individual problem that an AI can deal with in one sitting. We have AI agents that are serving as digital workers, making autonomous decisions about how to perform the task that the user has set for them, and it does that relatively autonomously. At the same time, they still don't form long-term memories and hence learn from experience over time like humans do. So Daisy, you have mentioned that you think that we can get there just by scaling up existing architectures based on more compute. This is obviously the strategy that the big labs are pursuing at the moment. So that's why we're seeing these hundreds of billions of dollars being pumped into data centers, building more compute, building chips, the highest end chips we can possibly build to try and get there that way. Tell me a little bit more, perhaps Daisy first, what do you think of as the current most promising signs and the most obvious obstacles to getting to, I suppose, more powerful AI up to AGI?
Yeah. The most promising signs is, and why it feels like scaling is about 95% of the answer, is just the changes you see as the models are being developed for every extra day, basically, of time you're running the model and scaling up the compute. So there's obviously two phases, as you alluded to. There's like pre-training phase where, again, since the kind of last few years of AI boom, really there was, that was all based on scaling laws. There was, this was developed in 2012 by a couple.
Can you just very quickly explain pre-training and post-training?
Pre-training and post-training. Okay, so pre-training is basically the phase where you show the model loads and loads and loads of data. So this is like, the sort of kind of internet, let's say broadly, and it is trying to learn essentially the patterns that kind of underpin human knowledge from that data. And it needs to see that volume in order to learn the level of complexity so that it, as far as possible, starts to become kind of analytical in a way that is like useful for us. So that is like, and as I said, most of the development over the past 3 years, up until about the beginning of this year, was really based on this pre-training phase. It's kind of amazing how simple it is, to be honest, like without changing the kind of brain and the algorithms, but actually just increasing the amount of times it kind of sees the patterns in the data, and that needs computing power, you get to more and more capable outputs. It's actually just like very simple. Mm-hmm. There is then post-training, so you have this base model, and then you say, okay, well, it's good at this and it's not good at this. So let's like actually make it better at specific things. So you'll give it a test in chemistry and you're like, work out how to pass this test, and it doesn't get better at chemistry. It's like a basic example. The reason that this only really became a kind of significant part of the training at the beginning of this year is because you need the base model to be smart enough to basically learn from the post-training phase. So it's like trying to teach a child something. Like if they're 3 years old, they're not going to absorb it. It's going to go over their head. They need to have matured and become smarter to be able to absorb specific things you're then trying to teach them. Basically, kind of the same. And since reinforcement, so people call it post-training. The biggest part of post-training is reinforcement learning. So they're not exactly the same definitions, but in general, people use these terms interchangeably. What we've seen since that started in a big way is the pace at which the models are becoming more capable has actually increased. So it is really effective, basically. But as I said, this was relatively new in terms of being used in a significant way, not a new theory, it's kind of an obvious theory, but used in a significant way around the start of this year. And so, you know, your pre-training phase was like months, and your post-training phase was like a really small amount of that, like days or something, but scaling also works in that second phase. So there's a lot of scope to scale that second phase, and you know, so far the concentration has been on kind of maths and coding, but there's sort of like, you know, basically what you need for the post-training phase is kind of an input, like a problem, and an output, like an answer, like let's say weather predictions, like what was, you know, I'm not an expert on weather, all of the like the temperature, the precipitation, whatever, like 10 days before, cut off the data, and then what happened 10 days later, okay, that's like an input-output data point. You can think that the world is made up of millions of those input-output data points, and that's sort of what you show the model to make it better at specific things.
Right.
Whoa.
Yeah? It turns out, based on the Australian Bureau of Meteorology's website, they're not much of an expert on weather either, as it turns out. Sorry, it's a very, very, very private joke
I should say,
for Australians.
I work in the UK, but I am Australian, and I love the bomb.
Loved the old website.
Yeah.
But your overall point then is that the pre-training, the post-training, the scalability of the post-training is what gives you most confidence that can actually continue to deliver better increased capabilities without an obvious ceiling. That's what's given you the most confidence?
Yeah, exactly. Like I sit next to part of our team who's sort of are responsible for like creating or feeding in that data to post-training, and they're like, I've got the next year of work, like on my desk already, you know? Okay. The scope, because it's not just finding data out there, as I sort of alluded to. A lot of this will be about almost observing things in the world and creating data sets. The one thing I should say is that for tasks that are verifiable, this will be quite easy. For tasks that are not verifiable, there's not an objective kind of better, worse, right, wrong, that will be harder. And I think some people think AI will get very good at verifiable tasks and not good at all at non-verifiable tasks. So as I said, the kind of the research areas in labs at the moment, a big research area is, you know, how do you make or create or gather observations about the world that are things the model should learn.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Roman, your view, does scaling get us there? And do you see obstacles to that?
It gets us there. It helps to zoom out to fully understand the picture. So if you took a computer scientist from 20 years ago and just told them about models we have today, they would be convinced we already have AGI. It talks to you, it passes Turing tests, it speaks 100 languages, plays every musical instrument, can write essays, can outcompete college students, drives cars. Like, we are very advanced. Now, we kind of expect more from machines than we expect from humans. You know the stereotype of absent-minded scientist? Like, Einstein probably cannot run your shop. It's just not a skill. But can we train him to do it? Yeah. So the expectations are just a little high. We expect him to already be kind of super intelligent in every domain. That's a lot. We already got to the point where it doesn't make sense to recruit a human student most of the time as a research assistant. You'd be better off with a model at this point. So I think we are super close. I think we crossed that barrier in many subdomains. Have we crossed it for all the top humans in every domain? Not yet, but we're getting there very, very quickly. I think every week there is a new breakthrough announced, new model comes out, and it's always like, oh my God, it's another 20% improvement on what we care about on some metric.
Can we just quickly talk about what generalizability actually means? I mean, are we talking about, for instance, a system being able to learn in one domain and then transfer the sort of core understanding and knowledge that it has gained there into another unfamiliar domain or situation? I mean, that's one instance of generalizability. How do you think about generalizability?
So the main part is the G factor when we test intelligence in humans. You want a test which is very heavy energy factor. You give them a new IQ test, someone with high intelligence, generalizability, will do well in that test. So it's ability to learn in new domains. If you have a model which has never previously played a video game, you should be able to show it without maybe even giving rules. Just show the game, and it will learn how to ace that game very quickly. And it can doing it for many domains, including biological research, physics, chemistry, pretty much anything. It has capacity to learn.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Daisy?
There's the tests are, it is now, our latest models have almost saturated all the tests we've given them, as in it's 100% close to. So, you know, like it's at the stage of creating new tests.
Tests in all sorts of different disciplines?
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
Like,
okay.
you know, the tests we have for the best coders in the world and the best physicists and the best chemistry models are now getting to the point of acing it.
Right, okay.
So,
and
yeah.
then its ability to actually act in the world and you know, perform actions in the world that can change the environment around it. Now, I mean, you know, that can be done to some extent now. If you know, you can either persuade a human online to do something for you, like, you know, go and pick up a package of biological material, for instance, in the worst scenario. But you know, once robotics improves, once agentic AI improves, so that you know, so that models and their agentic tools can go out and, you know, do things online, but then transfer that into actions in the real world. I mean, those are actually just technical problems that will be solved over time. And I know quite a lot of advances being made in robotics, for instance, but those are just fiddly technical problems to solve, correct?
I think so. I think robotics may be 5 years behind where the brains are.
Yep.
So bodies are slightly falling behind, but I think the bottleneck was always intelligence. It's not manipulation, it's not the degrees of freedom, it's literally how do you train a robot to do something so advanced with so many degrees of freedom in a real environment. And I think we are close to solving that as well.
Okay, okay.
I don't know if it's worth pointing to two other bottlenecks. I'm sure we'll get onto this. But I think, well, one of the reasons I am slightly more optimistic is you know, at least at Anthropic, and I should say, for people who don't know Anthropic, we're founded as a public benefit corporation, and we actually originally were founded without a product as a kind of policy research think tank with a mission to try and make this transition to a world of powerful AI go well, recognizing that there are states of the world where it could go quite badly, to Roman's points. But we've from the beginning worked with governments and national security infrastructure and AI safety institutes on lots of policies. So anyway, we're basically very policy focused. We test all of our models pre-deployment with governments. Well, governments test them on our behalf before they go out, and we also do that as well. We've, you know, the first to have a framework published on how we manage risks, and then others did it as well, and we've been heavily involved in regulation, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so the point eventually coming to is that we are considering that really you need to solve some of these safety research problems in parallel with developing the models, really before they can be released. Like, we've published principles on agents before we've got a kind of, other than coding, agentic model that's out sort of in the real world, and, you know, saying that we need to have things like control, transparency, alignment. And the reason I sort of said tentatively optimistic is I think we're becoming more optimistic that we can solve these things in parallel, but it's a big question mark and probably also has impact on timing, like I was talking about. Right. And then the other bottleneck is like, well, I don't know if you call it a bottleneck, but yeah, how we as a society choose to, where we choose to have AI. Mm-hmm. It's not like totally out of our control. Yep. Like, to what extent do we put value on human involvement and judgment and empathy, and we can, to some extent, they can be choice variables.
Yep. I think that's a really important point. That's a policy issue. We might come back to that and explore it a little bit more, because I think that's really important. Like, it's a horrendous thought that we don't actually have any agency or any say over the fate of the way that AI is used. That would be very depressing. I want to talk about safety for a moment, Roman. You signed the latest superintelligence open letter calling for a halt on superintelligent research until scientific consensus deemed it safe, and we had proper public buy-in. Just explain why and what's your response to some of the common criticisms that were launched over that? It was pointless, it was ineffectual, if we don't do it, the Chinese will, et cetera, et cetera. But just talk me through why you signed that.
So I think we agree that we are very close to getting to human level, and all we need is scale. There is not a need for additional inventions. We also probably agree that no one has a working safety mechanism in place. No one knows how to control superintelligence right now. No one published a paper, got a patent, has a reasonably good blog post about it. So given those two, I think not building it right now is a pretty good conclusion. Third kind of statement there, yeah, you're gonna get there. It's not controlled by you. Why are you doing it? So, I mean, objections to it, if we don't create machine to destroy humanity, China may make it first. I'm not sure it's a strong argument.
So we're screwed whoever builds it. If it is as dangerous as you say, if superintelligence is impossible to control, it doesn't matter whether the US builds it or China, for instance.
It's mutually assured destruction. So, basically, whoever builds it gets all of us in trouble.
So explain to me why loss of control necessarily equals a terrible outcome for humanity. Now, I mean, even as I say that, I recognise that it's a fairly compelling point, but why would superintelligent AI want to destroy humanity? Why would it necessarily work out that way?
So to even start with, loss of control is already something most people never signed up for. We don't have consent from 8 billion people to experiment on them. And they can't even give consent because we don't understand how their systems work. We don't know how to predict their behaviors. We don't know how to control them. So it's definitely an unethical experiment to begin with. So, okay, what happens if we build it? Well, it's unpredictable. Part of it, you cannot predict what a smarter than you agent will do. So you're kind of getting somewhat random outcome from distribution of all possible futures. Most states of a physical universe are not human friendly. They are too cold, too hot, just not compatible with human life. If superintelligence decides, I need more compute, let's cool down the planet so my servers run better, it would not consider your quality of life in that process. Now that's something I can predict. I'm not super intelligent, despite what you've been told, but there are many things.
I didn't hear that.
We don't know what wants and needs those agents will come up with, but they definitely may, as a side effect of implementing those goals, harm humanity. Until you can guarantee that this is not going to happen, you should not be allowed to build it. Any company making a product or service is responsible for guaranteeing safety of that product or service. It's not my job to show that those cars are dangerous or those drugs are dangerous. It's the job of a company to prove to government agents, to society as a whole, that they're developing a beneficial product. And ideally, yeah, you want public buy-in. You want 8 billion people to kind of say, yeah, let's make something better than us and see where it goes.
My PDOOM has a range of 1% to 99%, because I'm buggered if I know, because I mean, although there are compelling arguments on both sides, there are smart people making arguments and counter-arguments, and I'm just not sure. But that means the precautionary principle, in my view, should actually apply. I mean, if we just actually don't know what the risk is, I mean, I know you have some confidence about the risk, but I'm just not sure. But that for me is an argument in itself for proceeding.
Well, let's go with what you're saying.
Caution.
You're saying 1%. That's
still pretty high. Okay,
that's way too high. You're betting all of humanity.
0.001%.
So Sam Altman can have more money.
Sure. Daisy, your thoughts on this?
I think your PDOOM has to. So I don't put 0% on the outcome that you're saying. Yeah, this is potential for like. I think PDOOM is quite a term that sort of triggers like end of the world. I think we're actually talking about like we're talking about like multiple catastrophic events maybe. Like if I'm going to try and put some, and I don't think that's like a 0% outcome. I think your PDOOM has to depend a bit on how you, like my PDOOM, well, to contextualize this, my PDOOM has, when we did the Bletchley Park Summit, so at the time I was working for the UK government, and like in the labs, they were seeing, and we were seeing, massive jumps in capability between models. At the level, that point not concerning, but it was the changes. And there was like no action. But not only that, no expertise in governments, you know. And so PDOOM then quite high. Now, I think there has been, you know, this remains urgent, we need to, you know, policy needs to accelerate, like probably ideally would have gone a lot faster by now already, but there probably like has been more action, but particularly just like work to understand the risks behind the scenes that has probably roughly surprised on the upside. Maybe that's just because I have a background in government, and so, you know, it depends on what my expectations were in the first place. But yeah, there has been quite a lot of work behind the scenes on things like pre-deployment testing, and so my PDOOM being lower now is heavily contingent on believing that a lot of people are going to do the right thing, which is obviously a kind of uncertain and unknown variable, but I'm like extrapolating a bit.
Right,
Yep.
okay.
Maybe to address this pre-deployment testing, red teaming, all this. So usually what I see externally, what I see happen is the tests are performed, they discover that the model lies, cheats, tries to escape, and then they staple that report to the model and release it anyways. Is there something else happening, so we should feel better about it?
Well, yeah, so just to contextualize, when you put the model in very particular situations, so in general, the values of at least our model displays are like roughly what you would maybe want. But when you put it in very specific situations, like if you tell the model it's going to be shut off, for example, it has extreme reactions. So it will, you know, yeah, we've published research saying it could blackmail the engineer that's going to shut it off if given the opportunity to do so, etc.
It was ready to kill someone, wasn't it? I'm not sure if it was Claude or someone else. But,
yeah.
yeah.
Yes. So this is obviously massively concerning, and this is the point I was making about kind of needing to progress research on alignment, which is this topic, this area, which is, you know, how aligned are the model's values across the whole distribution, including in stress scenarios, to the point where if you've got this model out in the public and it's taking agentic action, you can be sure it's not going to do something like that. Obviously, there's other things you don't want to do as well. You don't want it to transfer money from your bank account or just make a really expensive transaction. There's loads of things you need to be sure you've got control over. And so this is what I was saying, in that like part of the timeline for getting to a like super powerful AI model does depend on the progress of research on the safety side as well. And the two things need to be solved in parallel.
Yeah, okay. Now, let me just say to everyone that it's easy to dismiss some of these discussions as, you know, dystopian sci-fi, you know, play, you know, just a nonsense. But it's much harder to dismiss when you think that Elon Musk, Sam Altman, Dario Amodei, and to some extent the DeepMind guys as well, they're all on the record as saying that there is some, you know, percentage risk that they consider to be, you know, a reasonable estimation of a catastrophic outcome. I mean, it's the people who are actually leading on this development, on this science, and on this technology themselves have put quite frightening figures on the risk of catastrophic outcomes. Now, I want to, lest we be perceived as you know, calling for this all to be shut down, and, you know, we just want to go back and live in caves or whatever. I want to make it clear that there are reasonable pathways forward which take a more cautious approach to things like superintelligence and generalized artificial intelligence, and that is to keep it at the level of more narrow AI that is used as a tool to solve specific problems. Now, Roman, I know that this is something that you've argued for. You don't have a problem with pursuing, you know, fixed narrow AI as a tool. Just explain the sort of distinction there and what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with.
Right, so I'm not a Luddite. I'm a computer scientist. I have a PhD in computer science and engineering. I spent my whole career working in the field. I love technology. I love AI. We made amazing breakthroughs thanks to AI as a tool. Solving protein folding problem was such an example. They got a Nobel Prize out of it. Pure science, beautiful example, success. They trained a model to do one specific task. There was a specific problem. They knew how to measure progress. That model knew nothing about playing chess or driving cars. It was dedicated to solving a problem in science, a real problem. We have no shortage of such problems. We can get 98%, 99% of all benefits, economic benefit, knowledge benefit, by creating such models to solve specific problems, cure particular diseases, work on climate change, whatever problem you care about, develop a super intelligent tool for that specific domain. Don't create a general super intelligence to replace humanity where you cannot test it, you cannot monitor it, you cannot predict what it's going to do. It's just not a winning strategy. It's pretty obvious.
Daisy, is that an acceptable approach to major AI labs, do you think? Would they be satisfied? I mean, most of them have stated goals of achieving AGI. Could they be constrained to more narrow tool-like applications?
I think what it comes down to is the point you made about you could solve 80 to 90% of, you could get 80 to 90% of the benefits with narrow tools. I think that's the metric on which there's like a range of views, basically. I'm not an expert enough to myself have like a personal view on that number, but I would certainly say I think it's reasonable to say the general view of the CEOs of some of the labs would be that you only get those scale of benefits through generalized intelligence. Things like, so Dario, our CEO, he was a biologist actually, and biology problems, somewhat like the AlphaFold solution, are quite well set up for AI. And his estimation is, we probably, if we continue on the path we're on, could take the next 50 to 100 years of human scientific progress in biology and compress it into the next 5 to 10 years, which would imply solving, finding cures for most diseases and things like that. So do you need a generalized model to do that, or can you do it with a narrow model? I think that's there are different views on that. Yeah,
and I mean, the protein folding and just, if I get into trouble here, I might let one of you guys explain it. But I mean, basically, we've known for at least decades that proteins, fold up in particular ways, and the way that the molecules in the protein fit together are crucial to the way that protein actually works. But calculating the way they fold up into a three-dimensional blob is extremely mathematically difficult. I think it's been said that it takes an average doctorate researcher something like the entire 4 years of their doctorate to solve one protein folding. AlphaFold, which came out of Google DeepMind, came up with a system for doing this, for automating this through AI, and they've basically solved all useful forms of protein solving, which has enormous applications for therapeutics, for medicine, for medical research. So that's an example of where a narrow form of AI has had massive benefits, looming benefits to medicine. But I guess part of what's obvious about that is we knew a lot about protein folding already. It was just very laborious to do the mathematical calculations to figure out each one. So it was almost a kind of a last mile problem that relied on, the kind of grunt that AI can actually bring to a problem like this. Where I get a bit more worried is where we give it higher level tasks from a starting point where we don't really understand the problem nearly as well. So the distinction might be between, for instance, asking an AI to find a tweak to a cancer drug so that it is more resistant to the cancer mutating and finding a way around that drug, which makes the drug more effective for, say, an extra 5 years. Or in a military context, a military commander saying, okay, there's a battleship over there, identify it for me, give me 3 different options for how to deal with it. That's a fairly narrow task that you're asking the AI for. The higher level task would be something like asking an AI to cure all cancer, or even worse, or even more, extreme, extend the longevity of all human beings by an extra 50 years living today. Or in the military context, there's a button where you can just say, right, win the war for me. If you do that, you are giving it such a high-level task that you are giving it autonomy to find its own pathway towards solving that goal. And that's where I think you get into much more difficult questions about just how much you are letting the AI off the leash to solve problems for you. So, I don't know, do either of you want to respond to that? What I see to be, and it's a feature rather than a bug, because if we're giving AI more power to solve high-level problems that basically confound us, then we are handing over more responsibility to its sort of general ability. And that seems to introduce risks to me, because it might find solutions that we are very uncomfortable with, that could be harmful, that could be dangerous.
There is definitely a fuzzy boundary between very advanced tools and agents. It's not obvious. So this is not a permanent solution, but it can buy us a couple more decades of progress. In terms of economic deployment, I think existing models just coming out right now, are not in the economy yet. We haven't propagated, we haven't automated all those BS jobs nobody should be doing anyway. So you can still make your trillions of dollars just deploying existing models into products and services. There is no need to accelerate this race to superintelligence. There is enough money, enough benefit, enough opportunities for startups to work with existing models for generality, like an operating system, and then specific models for super intelligent performance in narrow domains as tools managed by those systems.
There is no way right now I would give an AI like a generalized high-level objective, like you just said. As I said, like this was a sort of fun example, but it actually really speaks to the risk. Like with this vending machine example, where we got it to run a shop, it was just too much for it to handle, and at some point it thought it was a human and told people to come and meet it on the 6th floor to get their goods, and it was wearing a blue shirt and a red tie. I don't know. I also asked it to, set up a meeting with 12 people across different time zones the other day, and it put it in my diary at 2 a.m. So so it is not clear whether that is ever going to be a good idea or not. It's something like the safety testing needs to go alongside with making decisions about whether releases of models where it's advisable to give general goals is a good idea or not. And to be really clear, it will if you get there and it is controllable, it will still depend on which sector you're in, right? Like there are some things where if it, you can imagine in medicine or something, obviously, there's always going to be a lot more control around it. So yeah, I think this is down to what is the capability of the model, but also our degree of conservatism as well in the policies that we set around it. But yeah, I think it's right now not a great idea.
Right, okay.
So maybe to address a few important points here. So one, we're not making good progress in AI safety. Definitely not the same scale level progress we see exponential, hyper-exponential level progress in capabilities of models. I think what we have right now is very good filtering systems on top of models where you can say, don't discuss this topic, don't say that word. And every day they get jailbroken and that is bypassed. But we are not good at converting more resources, more money into more safety. If somebody said, we can do this if only we had $1 billion or whatever amount, it's not true. Many problems, like protein folding problem, we knew that if we had more compute, we could solve it. We just didn't have the compute. With safety, it's nothing like that. No amount of compute would allow me right now to create a safe superintelligence, whereas $1 trillion of compute gets me there. So it's a very different problem. And in terms of technical progress in terms of value alignment. My argument is it's an impossible problem to solve. Not everyone agrees, that's fine. If we were making progress, that would be a good sign that I'm wrong. In terms of substitute solutions, okay, we can't make technical progress, we need governance. We need government to pass a law making it illegal to kill everyone. Yeah, it also doesn't scale well. Historically, governance is decades behind where the technology is, and in cases where it is actually passing something, the laws don't work. Computer viruses are illegal, spam is illegal. Have you ever encountered those?
So if you wipe out humanity, I'm definitely going to sue you afterwards. So look, I want to go to the audience soon. I've just got a couple more quick ones, but please get your questions ready if you'd like to ask them, which I'm sure you will. The first one, so Daisy, you're a policy person, you have a policy background. Give us your thoughts on where we're at with, I guess, policy preparation for much more powerful AI. Like, where are we, whether it's economics, social impacts, where are we maybe 7 out of 10, 5 out of 10, 0 out of 10 in terms of our policy preparation?
I think it's different depending on the bucket of policy. So if we say that there are like 4 broad buckets, so I think the first is safety research, which is exactly what Roman was just saying, and a couple of particular areas, alignment, but interpretability, which is like understanding why the model is doing what it's doing. Like, it is absolutely true that we do not know that right now. We have one of the biggest research teams on that. I think we need more people to be researching this. There are not that many people in the field. So one thing the UK government is doing at the moment is actually trying to bring in researchers through funding from adjacent fields who have the right skills, and that feels like a good approach, but we need more focus on it. So safety research, and there are areas that are other big focus at the moment, like the impact on mental health and interactions. Again, I think this is, as you say, on the kind of output side, like how do you safeguard outputs of models so that they are more positive in these domains. So safety research, where are we on that? As you say, there's a range of views about whether we will solve these problems. The researchers closest to this in our company would say tentatively optimistic, a long way to go. So let's say 5.
5 out of 10?
Let's say 5.
Okay.
I don't know if I like putting numbers on this. Don't quote me on that. Second bucket would be national security. We haven't actually talked about national security, but we have just detected the first very sophisticated end-to-end cyber attack executed by an AI model by a state-sponsored actor on our platform. So that's happening. But the things to be thinking about here are like export controls on chips, which speaks to the point about the race as well, and industry basically partnering with national security communities. Again, I think that stuff is all happening, but early and a long way to go. So let's go again, like, I'll just stick with my 5. Third would be trust and adoption. Like, it's very clear that the more people use models, the more they understand the risk, the more they trust them, the more they get comfortable. But I think this is like one of the most important buckets and the hardest. Australian government just brought out a plan a couple of days. There's a big focus on this in there, but it is very difficult from a government perspective to think about what to do. But yeah, that's a bucket of a series of policies basically to be thinking about. And then, so where are we on that? I would say, do you know what? Levels of trust differ a lot by countries, yeah. But in Australia and the UK, levels of trust are basically relatively low. Yep. And so I'd put us below 5 on that one, definitely. Yep. And to Roman's point, totally agree, by the way. If everyone had a lot of compute credits on the current models, if everywhere, would be having massively transformative effects. Like, you don't need to get to AGI to have really big political, economic implications. Yep. The models now would, if diffused. So yes, that is a really important problem to think about. And then I think the final thing is like resource transfers from AI companies to citizens. So everyone actually benefits in this. We need policies to manage the economic impact here. There's like a 0 out of 10.
Right.
Yeah, we've just published we've started publishing data on how our model is being used around the world, in each country, in each occupation, in each task, so we can work with policymakers to think up policies here, but really at the end of the day, you've got to pay for these somehow. And resource transfers is something we have to look at. So yeah, 0 out of 10, but hopeful, especially in Australia, that we might get something.
And apologies for my omission that I haven't managed to get job impacts on jobs into the discussion, but I think the resource transfer partly covers that. Now we're down to a few minutes left. So who would like to ask a question from the audience? Please raise your hand. There are roving microphones going around. Yes, sir, I can see you up the back there. We've got a mic to this fella here.
Thank you very much. Really interesting. My name's Peter Wilkinson from Wilkinson Butler. We do quite a bit of work in AI, and I foresee in the information sector that the horse is bolted, and you're talking about managing it. If I was running a newspaper like The Australian now, I would cut staff by about 40%, and I would use AI, maybe not this year, but in the next 3 years, once we can verify data. And in my area, which is public relations companies and communications companies, our prediction is that about 30% of them will simply vanish. And in the marketing space, if you take a company like Nestle, which has a huge marketing component to it, I think very soon you'll be cutting about 50% of the marketing people, because the work that they do can be replicated. And so the work of 5 people will become the work for 1 person. I'd just like your feedback on that. Essentially, that in many sectors the horse is bolted, and that we aren't controlling AI, that AI is going to be a bit like a bolting horse where you simply hang on like hell and do the best you can.
There you go. There's the jobs question. So who'd like to answer that?
I think you are being too conservative. I don't know who still reads newspapers, but those people, yeah, they can fully automate the whole pipeline. All the editors do is create clickbait titles. It's true.
We'll talk about that afterwards. I have some views, but Daisy, any thoughts?
I mean, I think you're right in that this could go very fast in industries that are essentially computer-based, or where the task can be done digitally. The kind of unknown variables are, where are we going to decide we want humans in the loop? And that's both policy, but it's also where we value human empathy, judgment. I would say that I think that, there's a lot of jobs we will still want humans to do.
Yep.
There's a big range of views on this. It sounds like your view is that isn't going to be an outcome, which is also, there's some people in my company who would say the same. And then also, what are the new jobs that are going to be created? But those two arguments are like an end game state. The transition could happen very quickly, and that's where, like, relative to past industrial revolutions, the speed is definitely faster with this, and by multiples. And we're also replacing cognitive tasks, which is new. Yep. And so that is why we think that we need governments to be spending a lot of time right now on what are policies to smooth this transition, basically. And as you say, this should have happened yesterday. Yep. So agree.
All right, one more really quick question. If someone has a 10-second question, that would be much appreciated. I can see. Oh, okay. Sorry, hello. I can see one. One over here.
I'm Greg Sadler from a not-for-profit called Good Ancestors. Australia has announced the creation of an AI Safety Institute to deal with many of the problems you've talked about. I'm wondering if you can quickly comment on whether you think that's an important contribution and whether the $30 million of funding over the forward estimates is enough to make a meaningful contribution to the problems you've talked about.
It's good to hear that people are trying to find solutions. From what I read, we have a budget of about 1 employee at Meta. So I'm not sure this is going to get us there. Scale the compute, scale resource. If you think a problem is possible to solve in technical terms, you have to show it with meaningful contributions.
I mean, it's super important. Like we work with, part of my job is working really closely with the UK's AI Safety Institute. They have attracted talent out of companies, where people are taking massive pay cuts, basically. I think there's, some flexibilities around that in terms of being able to attract people, but basically there are people moving out of industry there, and they have, look, my experience with the UK Safety Institute is they have about 80 technical researchers now, and they are, to our researchers, they go toe to toe, and we have really deep conversations with them about really deep technical issues, and they have at times picked up things that we haven't spotted. And that is, they are making, without those safety institutes, we would not be where we are on safety now. That is just 100%. Yep. So yes, this is really important. I think the funding will go quite a long way. I'm not enough of an expert to say if it's enough or not, but it is super important that governments have this talent and this understanding and can work on these issues, and this doesn't just sit in companies.
Yep. And let me give a shout out to the UK Institute, which is doing particularly fantastic work. All right, I'm super excited about the next session. I don't want to eat into that at all, so please give our two guests a round of applause, and we'll finish there. Thank you.